my cousin died very suddenly, and that completely brought me out of the days. I was like, what is life? What the fuck am I doing? I'm like 26 years old. I'm working at Starbucks. Like,
living in
what
LA.
am I doing? Yeah. Like, I've been living here now for 5 years, and I have not booked any sort of network show. Like, what are we doing?
Julia.
Hello.
Welcome to Bitter Bitch.
Thank you.
Julia Coulter, filmmaker extraordinaire. And we met in a writer's group and in a writing class, and then turned into a writer's group that has since been going strong monthly. Pretty much. So you're a filmmaker.
Yes.
Actor, writer, director, producer at this point.
Yes.
And you just completed your first feature-length film. You wrote it, you directed, you starred in. Yep. And it's based on your life, essentially.
Sort of.
We'll start there. You're not from LA, but we're in LA currently.
LA. No.
Where are you from? Where did it start? And what brought you to LA and when?
So I'm from New Hampshire. I was technically born in Boston, which I feel like just like Boston has such a strong, I don't know, everything that I like have to say that.
Yeah.
I am a Bostonian.
I love that. Well, you shot in Boston. Just outside.
We shot like one day in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that.
For the movie. But yeah, from New Hampshire. Always was just like a theater nerd in school, but was never like the star of all the plays, and I was not that person. And often like definitely in like middle school and high school also did like the crew, was just like a set painter and just wanted to be involved. Yeah. So, but I kind of at like probably junior year of high school, when you have to like make life decisions, was just like, I can't imagine not doing this. Like, if I do these 3 plays, that's the only plays I'm ever going to do for the rest of my life. Yeah. That's crazy. I can't think about that in that way. But so yeah, I wanted to do that as my career and like be an actor. And I always just saw it as like, I'm just an actor. That's all I do.
On screen, on at
screen.
that point, was it on stage mostly, or had you dabbled with on screen?
I hadn't really dabbled with on screen. I mean, there's basically like just that doesn't exist in New Hampshire as like an option, like doing background work or something like that.
Even now?
No,
still not. Like, there's no market there.
There's a big market now. I say big. There's a decent size market in Massachusetts now.
Okay.
And there's been some like very large films that have filmed there, but New Hampshire is far enough away, or where I lived in New Hampshire was far enough away that I was not aware of any of that.
Were you thinking on stage, or were you like big screen TV film?
I think any of it. I loved movies. Like, I loved film. I actually was super into like comedy, like SNL. I would watch like all the best ofs and was obsessed with like Chris Farley and all of those comedians. That's so not the style that I like write or work in anymore. At all. But
I've read your work. It's not like that. But that's okay.
At all.
But those were your inspirations as an actor.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So then when I started looking at acting schools, I felt like a lot of the schools in America put you through like just standard school for the first year. And I was like, well, I've already decided that I want to be an actor, so I don't need to take chemistry class or whatever.
When are we ever going to use that on screen?
We need to use that. So I started looking at UK schools because they were so much more like 3-year program, very specific. I just felt like everyone who had gone to those schools was working in some capacity or another.
Would you say also, knowing what you know now, and like over the years of obviously since high school to college to being a working actor and in the industry, that I feel, and this is a personal opinion, but I'm curious what you think, like British actors are almost taken more serious, and like they harbor this craft, or they take it, I don't know. I don't know if it's take it in a more serious fashion, or if they're more professional, or they're really focused on the craft of acting versus the fame and like what comes with being an actor.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your thought was, because you ended up studying out there.
So. Yeah. So I like long story, trying to be short.
You're fine.
Went to the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama for acting, auditioned, and did my callback like the same day in New York City, and was just kind of like,
I guess I'm doing it.
Yeah. And had never visited the school, never been to the UK, and just moved there. But yeah, I totally think that was my experience with it. Like, for sure, within the first week, like, the head of acting was like, if you can do anything else, or you can imagine yourself being happy doing anything else, leave. Like, really. And that it was a job. It is very much a job there. And even when we got to third year and we're doing play after play after play, like, I did 5 shows in third year.
Wow.
So we just went back to back to back. It was very much like you go in and do your job, do the play, and then everyone like meets at the bar afterwards and has a drink and goes home.
Yeah.
And like, it was not my, I mean, obviously it's high school and that's very different too, but it's like when you were in a play in high school, people would like bring you flowers and it was like, you're the most amazing thing ever.
You're celebrated.
Yeah. And this was very much like,
you're done.
Yeah.
Good job.
It's all right tonight. You kind of messed that up, but
5 shows in a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And did you, at the end of the third year, what was their kind of next steps protocol? Like, did they set you up for going on to work in an industry?
I think probably yes and no. I think they set you up. If you were British and you went to one of those schools, because there's sort of a conference of drama schools in the UK, which are sort of the top like 10, 15 schools there. Their showcases are very well attended there.
Okay.
The
Showcases
UCLA or like USC showcase, agents and managers and people, like big agents and managers aren't going to those. Like, sorry, hate to break it to you.
But in the UK,
but in the UK, like, I remember coming back. I mean, I moved back because I just felt like dealing with visas and doing all of that stuff was like not worth it. And I always had planned to move back to the US. And I got very interested in the indie film scene, which there is a lot of there. But I knew that if I stayed there, like, I would be the token American. I would probably end up doing a lot of radio, which I do like.
Interesting. Because
they would do like radio plays, and it's an American show, so you have an American accent. Like, here you go.
I didn't know that was still a thing that people did. I feel
very
like that's
big
from
there.
Like the 30s and 40s, like the radio shows, which is cool because it's just another opportunity for you to perform and to act. And
yeah,
I mean, it's essentially like podcasting now and narrative podcasts that have now come out, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So it
was a big thing that like we had radio classes. I worked for BBC Radio when I was there in college. That was like my first ever professional acting job.
That's so cool.
But yeah, I think they prepared you well in that, like, we did a showcase there at the Royal Court in London, and it was packed, like full house.
Was this your final show?
It was before our final show.
Okay.
But it was kind of like getting to the end of that final year. And people but also people came to the shows at the school, and the school eventually, I had already left, but they now do shows in London as well. They do, I think, a lot of their own like writing, which was sort of part of the curriculum when I went, where at the end of our first and second year, we had to write a 20-minute piece and perform it. And it could be anything. Like, that was the outline, was it's 20 minutes.
And was it a one woman, one man show? Or was it
could be whatever you wanted.
On stage, though, you're performing?
On stage, yeah.
Wow. So was that your first dive into writing? Or had you
Probably, yeah. And it was kind of freeing because I was
20 minutes is a long time. Like, especially 20 page. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very bad at spelling. I'm like
Same.
I was like tutored for English in school. Like, so I was very self-conscious about it, very embarrassed about it. And doing the 20-minute, so I wrote a one-woman like monologue for my first 20-minute first year performance. And it was so freeing because I was like, I don't have to show this to anyone.
Mm-hmm. I just do it.
It doesn't fucking matter if like shit is spelled wrong or like I know the cadence of it. I know when the commas should be.
And
I
if
know
you forget
what this is.
a line or you improv'd a line, like nobody knows.
No one knows.
It's your shit.
Yeah. And like it went over. That year was great. I did something totally different the next year and it like didn't really work as well, but it was it was just nice to like be in a somewhat like safe environment like that and try and like write a scene or write a monologue or people did crazy stuff that still like sticks with me. That is so cool.
I love that.
So I do think that was like the first bit. I don't think that the school, to get back to the original question, I don't think the school or any school prepares you for like what the industry actually is, especially in LA.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
So,
because you then, obviously you come back and in your mind, I'm assuming that you're like, okay, now on to the next step of my career. I've gone to school for this. I am now a trained actor. And is that when you were like back in, I'm like, this is now the next step, makes sense to go to LA?
Yeah. So it was like LA or New York. The rain and the clouds and everything really does get to you in the UK. It's brutal. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, nope, I want sunshine, movies. It seems like more stuff is happening in LA than New York. And this is, circa 2014. Mm-hmm. So that was probably true and probably still is true. And yeah, so I just decided to move here. But I did, I'm like happy that I did, but also in retrospect, I'm like, I wish that I had been a little more understanding of like, the industry isn't just gonna be like, oh my God, you went to some amazing like school in the UK. Like, great.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Here's the red carpet.
We'll sign you and get you on TV right away. But that was happening to people in the UK who I went to school with the UK.
Did you ever think to yourself, did you ever think at any point during this process and then after you moved to LA, I should get established or I could get established in the UK, get an agent there, work there a little bit and then bring that to the US? Or was it kind of just like either or and, I'm going to do the LA thing because that is what you do. It's the next step. It's the transition that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I just felt like there was so many weird like life hoops that I would have had to jump through to stay there that it wasn't worth dealing with that when I felt like I could just like get started coming to LA. And very like, I was 21 when I moved here. So very like super eager. But I think in some ways, which is kind of fair, having trained as many, for 3 years, like every day for the whole day, I didn't want to be in like a basic improv class, and now in retrospect, I'm like, I should have just sucked it up and like done that. Like it would have been nice to like go through those programs, and I ended up doing some of them much later, but that was one thing I came in very like hot shit that I was not.
I love that you're open about that though, because how many people have probably graduated from Juilliard, UCLA or USC drama or wherever and think, all right, I'm good. It's on my resume. It's at least like that box is checked.
Yeah.
I'll have no problem getting an agent. I'll have no problem getting into rooms. I'll have auditions coming at me like nothing. And then they are slapped with the reality check of, and Max said it in one of our past episodes that like LA doesn't need us.
No.
The industry isn't saying, welcome, we've been waiting for you, because they're not. Like the reality of this that they're not. But I'm curious at what point, like you move here, you probably get established. You didn't jump into improv or those classes.
No.
How long did it take you to get an agent? Was that on your radar? Did you get into any classes? Like what was the next step?
So the Conference of Drama Schools in the UK did do a showcase in New York and in LA for American students who had gone to programs in the UK.
That's nice.
It was fine. And it was like okay attended by agents, but it was also the weirdest kind of mixture of people. I mean, some super talented people and a couple people I still am like in touch with, but some people only did like a semester.
And they still got the opportunity.
Yeah. And so it was like a very strange mix, and we had such short amount of time. We were all meeting each other for the first time, and then we were doing like scenes together. It was just an odd thing, but I did actually get an agent from that
in
showcase.
New York or LA?
In LA.
Okay.
I only did the LA one. I didn't do the New York one. But this agent is now quite well established, and I have some friends who are with him, but at the time he was a pretty new agent. And again, like I kind of falsely thought like, oh, well, you know, just get me like some co-star auditions and like get me in the room and I can build up my resume. I was doing background work to try and get in the union, and I actually did do the like new media thing where I like wrote myself a short film and then Taft-Hartley'd myself into the
Is that
union.
Even an
you can't
option
do it
for
anymore,
that
I don't
anymore?
think.
Because I almost went down that path as well.
I don't think so.
And I think for people listening that maybe don't have a super strong knowledge of the industry or of the union and SAG and Taft-Hartley's and all of that.
Yeah.
Can you briefly explain like what you did and why for people who don't know what that is?
Yeah, I think I would not get in trouble at this point because I've
No.
been paying my dues for a while.
Yeah. Like the union, whatever.
But at the time, there was a loophole in new media projects, which could basically be like no budget, that you could submit them. And if you had someone who was already in the union in your project, you could then fill out a form that was a Taft-Hartley, which is basically
like
you need, like, it would be like me, if I was union and Juliana wasn't union, and I wrote something and I was like, I need Juliana's specific skill, so I'm Taft-Hartleying her into my short film. Now she would be SAG eligible.
Yeah.
So I did that for myself, and I did write a short film, but we never made it.
Oh, interesting. But you were still able to go through the process?
Yes. I don't think that...
You can't do that now anymore.
You can't do that anymore.
People.
And I think Taft-Hartleying has gotten much more strict about like who you're allowed to Taft-Hartley, and it actually does need to be that like you truly looked and couldn't find someone who was union who could do this role. Yeah. So you had to go into non-union.
Interesting. It's such a weird space to even think about that now, because I almost went down that path and then I ended up getting not Taft-Hartley, but I ended up getting like a SAG eligible. I got a voucher right? And then it kind of added up. But it's funny because thinking about that now and the things the artists and myself included would go through to get into this union, which is like at the time felt like this benchmark of success as an actor. Yeah. To be like, oh, I finally made it into the union. I am legit actor. I can be taken serious. I'm going to go out for real projects and real roles. Yeah. To now sit here 2024 and gone through all the things that the union's gone through and the industry's gone through and be like, all right, well I don't know that I'd be fighting as hard in this moment in time as I was 4 or 5 years ago to be taken quote unquote serious in this industry to be a union actor, because unfortunately 8% of the commercials are non-union now unfortunately. And those used to be like a big paycheck for actors, and then the union has had its struggles obviously with the work that is available. So it's interesting. But at the time, like you said, you were 21, 22.
That was what you had to do. Yeah.
You had to get, did you feel like you had to get into the union to then be in the room, be in the right rooms and audition for legitimate stuff?
I think yes and no, because I did the whole process Taft-Hartley myself. I was SAG eligible, and then I stayed SAG eligible for years.
Which they say, and I don't know if it's still the same case, but that was the soft spot, because like, you could do non-union and you could do union. Yeah.
And so, but it's funny because I actually had lunch with my agent the other day, who is a good friend of mine, and I've known her for years now. I did eventually drop that other agent that I signed with off of the.
So you chose to leave.
So I chose to leave, and it was because I got this new agent, and I met her doing background. Like any person who's coming to LA to do acting, whether or not you've been to like the fanciest school ever, doing background work is actually fascinating.
It's I'm not going to say it's a fun process, but to be on the sidelines, I agree. I think doing it is just only going to add to your not just your resume.
something.
You learn so much being on set and watching and being just like a fly on the wall and watching what everybody does, watching other actors work. Like it really, really can benefit you. Just don't sign that waiver, right? That
just
don't sign your life rights away. Don't sign your likeness and image away forever. Don't let them scan you.
This was not happening in 2015 when I was doing background work.
Whole new world.
But yeah, I think even she said, like, you know, she was like, I meet young actors who are so eager and they're so excited and want to do this. And honestly, most of them, I tell them, like, go and do background work for a year. Go and try to get SAG eligible. Like, go and kind of check all these other boxes and then come back to us. Because on the other side, you know, you really can't, like, the auditions that I've had for the past 5 years, I couldn't do any of them unless I was SAG eligible. Like, there's no way.
They wouldn't have even considered you being completely non-union. You wouldn't have been their choice.
No. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. Like, at what point did you pivot or did you add the writing into the mix? At what point were you like, you know what, I'm going to try my hand at writing and add that to my slate and my, you know, my resume of the things that I do?
I was writing pretty immediately when I moved here, mostly because I was trying to write this movie that I still have copies of it. That was just like a relationship drama of shit that I was actually going through in real life.
Okay.
And it's like, I know that there is a story in there.
You still have it.
I still have it.
Do anything with it yet.
I still want to write it. I think it's really more of a mini series for like how much happens in it. But at the time, I think it was just like me dealing with my emotions. And so I was writing it and I got some feedback on it that wasn't like that great. And so I was like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, I just kind of do this on the side. And, yeah, it was never something that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a writer now. And I didn't really want, at the time, I read, you know, Save the Cat. I read some of those books and I was just like, whatever.
But you were always kind of consistently on the side, just like writing as things were coming up. And
yeah.
Was it just an outlet for you?
Yeah, it was like a creative outlet. And I was way more about like, not story or structure. It was like, oh, I have an idea for this scene that I want to write. Or like, this happened and I'd love to write a scene of it. And then, I don't know, there's like a middle chunk of time when I was in LA that I'm like, what was I doing? Like, I truly think it was like a few years. I like got my agent, got in some classes, was doing things. I worked at Starbucks for fucking ever, which was getting me up at like 4 a.m.
Same.
And I just was kind of like coasting, you know? And I think everyone kind of gets to that point where they put in like so much effort for like 3 years. And then they're like, okay,
I just gotta live.
I'm good. I guess I just,
Well, and you gotta pay your rent and like LA is such a beast and it's changed so much, not only as an industry it's changed, but I mean, culturally where we're at now, it's different. Obviously the industry's different. I would say too, I mean, personally, just speaking on my own opinions and behalf, is like coming here as a 20-year-old and living the actor hustle is a much different landscape than when you're in your 30s or you've left and come back, or you're just in a new place in your life. Because I can relate to that. When I was here at 20, I was very insecure. I was very nervous. I would not tell people I was an actor because I was almost like embarrassed of just being another actor. Because I mean, you throw a penny, you'll hit an actor in LA. And I was living in the Valley, like the creme de la creme of where the struggling actors lived. And so it was like, it felt almost like, I felt like people were going to judge me. Yeah. If I met them and like, what do you do out here? And they almost expected me to say I'm an actor. And so I didn't want to give people that satisfaction. So my own ego was like, oh yeah, I'm here. I do this, I do that. Like I said, everything but acting. Which was probably shooting myself in the foot because I met so many great people. And not to say like, oh, you know, they could have done something for your career, because that could have been a whole shit show in and of itself. But it's like, I just felt like I don't want to be just another actor out here doing what everybody else is doing and not, quote unquote, making it. So it's interesting to, you know, you got into like a rhythm. You got into like.
And I would get enough stuff that, you know, it would be like, oh, you have an audition at 2 on the CBS Radford lot. Great.
Great.
Like when there was in-person auditions. Amazing.
I know. So you were getting
so
legit
I was getting like
cool
legit
stuff.
auditions, but it was never like, I think I was like, well, this is it. This is what it is.
This is what we do.
And we just like hope that something, eventually one of these is like going to hit. And I feel like very much this is like, I'm gonna try to like skate through this mostly because I'm like the most emotional person ever.
Love it. We love emotion here at Bitter Bitch.
But in 2019, my cousin died very suddenly. And that, I think, completely brought me out of the days. I was like, what is life? What the fuck am I doing? I'm like 26 years old. I'm working at Starbucks. Like,
living in LA.
What am I doing? Yeah. And I haven't been, like, I've been living here now for 5 years? And I have not booked any sort of network show. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
So I wrote my first short film, which was very much about him. Mm-hmm. And
this is Brothers.
Yes.
Okay.
This is Brothers.
Which I've seen, and it's amazing.
And if it's on Amleto, if anyone wants.
Oh,
to
I
check
will
it out.
link that in the show notes for sure.
Please watch. Yeah. So I think that really just totally like woke me up, and I was like, okay, I need a project. I'm gonna make my own stuff. And just because of what the short was, I was not gonna be in it. So I was like, well, I'll direct it. That's fine. Like, writer, director, like adding the hat of acting is too much. I showed it to a friend of mine who I trust, and we have very similar taste. And he was like, you have to make this. And I wanted him to be in it. So that's what I was asking him. So with a lot of his help, we did end up making it. And I think I just got very lucky because of how much like heart was in the story, that it really moved people. And it's interesting, and we can get to the feature as well, but like how much the people around it had a lot of similar things happen to them. Not the same story, but like also had a relative die, or also had some sort of strained relationship with someone in their family. Like, it just was very fascinating how like those were the people who
connected.
Were drawn to it. Yeah. And then that's why it's good. It's not, yes, I do think it's well written, but like it's good because everyone,
great.
Yeah,
there's, it throws you for a loop kind of in there. And there is a simplicity to your work. And I mean that in the most positive way. And we've talked about this before. We talked about it right before the episode, but we start to kind of find our style, right? Yeah. As creators. And I feel like that can go in any which way. If you're a director, writer, actor, because even the way you act, it becomes like your style, your brand.
Yeah.
But also we have our inspirations and our tropes that we find and we like and we pull into our own work. And then you start to kind of hone your own style and your own voice. And so when I watched Brothers, I don't think at that point read much of your work, but I maybe like one piece because we had been in a writer's group,
in the class,
but I hadn't read much, but I watched it and I was like, oh, I could immediately see the type of filmmaker that you want to be and that you are. And so I watched it and I was like, oh, like this hits you on a way because it's so character driven and it is so relatable. Because like you said, it doesn't need to be like, oh, the exact same situation, but like so many people can relate and connect to those characters. Yeah. And the simplicity of which you shot. When did you shoot it? Because obviously...
So we shot it...
2020 happened.
Yeah. So, and I mean, we got kind of screwed by that because I raised money for it. Like, I wrote it by probably May of that year, and he had passed away in January 1st, and then raised money like all summer, which was a very odd process because it was also like I felt very weird about it because it was so personal and it was about a family member, but not like my immediate family. It was, so I tried to be very careful about how I went about that. And then we shot it in December of 2019, started the edit, and halfway through the edit, like the pandemic happened. And so we still finished it. The edit was done by like May of 2020. Okay. And we had fully completed it, but I I don't know. In retrospect, I'm like, should I have just waited until things were sort of back in person? But I started submitting it to stuff, and it has gone to a ton of festivals. Probably 70% of them were online at the time, which
that's what
sucks.
I was going to say. Like, you started submitting to festivals. I mean, for some people who may not be privy to the way maybe indie film works, is like a lot of the times as independent filmmakers, you go, you make a project, and then the festival circuit is a general rule of thumb next step. Like you go submit to a bunch of film festivals, hopefully you get in, and then you kind of do that marketing / press with those film festivals. So you, at 2020, everything shifted to online. So the festivals like Sundance, the huge ones, were all just streaming stuff online, weren't having any in-person events for the most part.
No.
So by the time you started submitting,
everything was
still online.
Yeah, it was still online. So like the first,
and a lot of these, and you can speak to this,
Yeah.
film festivals, one of the main points and also one of the biggest draws I would say as an artist is getting to talk to people about your film and meet people and have those conversations and build those connections and relationships. So not having that, like, did you see was there something that was missing from that portion of the
I think circuit? I have like a confidence in that short that I probably don't have in like any other work that I've done, that I'm just like, it is what it is. Like, it very much, I'm like, anyone who I've shown it to is like, yep.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a great representation of your work.
Of my voice and my work. Yeah.
It's a visual resume for you that shows your, like I said, your style, your voice that you're building, your genre, like the world you want to live in. Like, you could take that and be like, this is me as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And that, for that being your first go at it, like, I
mean, I didn't even finish it. Made a very bad short when I was like 22.
We've all done it.
We didn't finish.
I have one,
but yes,
also that happened.
But yeah, it was essentially,
I love that. So you did the festival circuit.
I did the festival circuit. The last like 3, I did end up going to Catalina in person because it was back by the time I submitted it. New Hampshire Film Festival had canceled their fest for like 2 years. And so by the time it was back up, it was in person, and I got accepted, which was crazy because they had like 2-year backlog of films. So, you know, I was able to still do those in-person ones at the end there, which was great. But, and I think for that film, because it was so personal and so emotional, like, I think it would have been really tiring to go to all the festivals and like talk about the inspiration for it, and
especially right after, like, because that's pretty fresh. I mean, having gone through that, wrote it, produced it, right, made it in the same year as this incident and this trauma happened to you, and then to go on, like you said, that following 6 months to a year to go and then talk about all of it. That's pretty fresh. So I agree, that probably would have been pretty hard.
So I was then on to the next of like, okay, I just want to see if I can like do this again. And for cheaper, like saved up my own money, did it for cheaper, wrote and was in my second short, had somebody else direct it because I did want to know how that felt. And
remind me of what that one's called.
Habit.
Yes.
And I still, like, I do love that. I think the script for that is amazing. I still stand by that script very hard. It was a fascinating test having somebody direct your work. And I think it solidified for me for the feature that I absolutely had to direct my work, but I was okay with not being in my own work.
All right, so let's talk about Road to La Top de Tour, which is...
You said it right. So many people...
Girl, I did my homework. I know. Yeah. Well, the fun part about this film, for me, selfishly, is that I got to read early drafts of it, being a film that you sort of, I felt like, workshopped. This was a feature script that you kind of workshopped through our writers group that we all got to read early drafts of and portions of as you were developing. And so to see it come to life, and I've seen clips of the footage far of the footage, not edited or color graded and all the things, but I've seen clips so far, which I'm so impressed by. I also felt like I was following your journey during the process of making it, whether it be a screenshot from the back of the camera monitor or you in the process of directing it. And because you wrote this, it's based on true life events in your life. It's also something that, like you said, you went on to direct because I could imagine it being very hard to hand that over to somebody, especially again, it being such a personal story, but then you also chose to star in it. So let's talk about that, because I want to talk about the process that you went through from script to now screen, and the challenges that you face sort of along that process. But also at one point, I remember you turned to me and you're like, I'm going to make this. And I love that, because you spoke it into existence and you're like, yeah, I'm going to make this. I'm going to find the money. I'm going to raise it. And I'm going to make my first feature and I'm going to direct it. And to me, I was like, hell yeah. Because that's my motto. Like, just do it.
Just do it.
Like, there's only ourselves standing in the way of something that's like really a big passion and dream. So like, if you tell yourself, and I tell this to my son all the time, if you tell yourself you can't do something, you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's only when you shift your mindset into, I can do this, and it's going to take time and it's going to take work and it's going to take practice, but it's only then that you can actually move to that next step and accomplish something. So I try to teach that to my 6-year-old, and you're a representation of somebody who did that I know personally. So let's kind of just back up to, you write the script, you workshop it, you get it to a point where you're like ready to shoot.
Yes.
Then you're like, I'm going to make this. You speak it into existence. What's the next step?
I spoke to like every single person that I knew who had either like made a feature or made like a ton of short. Like, I know a lot of people who have made like 10 short films,
but no
like,
features.
Oh my God. Yeah. But I mean, that is its own skill, and I'm sure that they are honing so much that I probably hadn't yet. But I had, I knew that it was very possible. I had friends who had done it, who made their film for like between, $200,000 and $300,000. And that is obviously a lot of money, but I was like, well, if I don't, like, let's just try. Like, how that truly has been my biggest obstacle. And I think
the
honestly,
financial part of it, raising the money,
probably is the biggest obstacle for most people out there.
I would agree.
And I think that I struggled. I went back and forth with like, because I got to a point with the script where I was like, this deserves something. Like this probably deserves $1 million, but we didn't make it for $1 million. So
you do what you can.
Yeah.
You made it.
Because I didn't want to wait for 3 years and maybe then still make it for $200K. I was like, no, I want to make it now. And there was definitely like sacrifices that we made because of that, like not having a very big crew, making last minute, like those are all things that I sort of take away as like lessons from doing the film, that like, okay, I'll definitely probably not do a film for this little money again.
So what was the final budget that you ended up going? Day one production, you had X amount.
Day one production, we had like $140,000.
Completely self-funded and raised by you.
Yeah.
You and your team and people that you brought in.
But a lot of it was like my family and friends and that's
amazing.
The 2 wealthy people we know who decided to give
everybody
me money.
should know a wealthy person. Yeah. And if you're one of those people, give to the arts.
Give to the arts. Yes.
We
thank you. Please.
But so you raised $140K, which is a lot of money.
Which is a lot. It was definitely,
but in the film world, it's not.
We were cutting some serious corners, and we also definitely overspent, and which just came out of like me and my husband's pockets. But I think having done it now, it's very interesting. There's a friend of mine is in the film, and he is now making his own feature. And he's sort of in the very early stages of the process. His feature is going to be made for a lot more money than mine. But he's in that in between where he's like approaching production companies and seeing if he can basically have someone help him like produce it on that level.
Right.
I did go down that path. Like I did approach some production companies, but I knew that I would lose a lot of say. Or at least it seemed that I would lose a lot of say. And
having brought them on,
you
would have lost creative control of certain things.
Yeah, and just like the timing of everything. Like I think absolutely you have to be patient, but to an extent. I think there's
would you agree, like, this industry seems on the outside to move very fast, like everything moves very fast.
Yeah.
But I do feel like when you're in the process like you were in, like everything moves at snail speed and nobody makes decisions without it almost just feels like making a decision to move forward with a project, or if it's an actor saying yes to a project, it's just like everything slows down into slow motion, and it's like you can't get an answer to save your life, and it's like just give me a no at that point.
Yeah.
Let's go back and forth for 4 months so you can then tell me no. Like
no, yeah.
It's a yes or a no, and I understand scheduling, but like if someone or a production or whatever is interested in something, like I guess I just don't quite understand. I'm also kind of an impatient person, but I don't quite understand the drawn out process in which this industry takes. It's like, maybe we're interested. Yeah. Call us back. And it's like, are you not, or are you in? Are you in or you out?
You're in or you out.
Like,
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. No, and I had those conversations. Like I did, at a certain point, even with the money, like I think once we got past that like 100K mark, it was sort of like, okay, can we figure out how to do this for this much money?
Right.
And like, yes, are we cutting corners? Yes. Is it going to be a slightly different film than it would be if we were making it for 300K, which was like my original kind of dream goal? Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. But I think that we still, for one, what was wonderful, and I will say this for like all writers out there, so many people did the film because they loved the script. Mm-hmm. And my script did not win any competitions.
But it got into some good ones.
It got into the second round of the Sundance track. Mm-hmm. And then it got into like the top 20% at Austin Film Festival that year. So it wasn't even a finalist. And I only say that because like, but maybe that's how much shit is out there.
But for those who know, like that's not easy.
No.
Because so many people submit scripts to these competitions and to these fellowships. And to get even that far says a lot about the script. It says a lot about the writing and the story and the structure and all the things that you need. So for it to go that far in some of those competitions to me, it's like, that's the validation sometimes that we need, unfortunately. That's like, okay. I know it's at least good enough. I know it's written. I know it's good enough on the page. So let's bring it to life.
But I think then bringing it to life, I had even more people, like just definitely some actors, but like the sound person who we ended up hiring, like loved the script. Like that was absolutely why he did it. And I think that is just an important, not that I ever want to like cheap out on people the way that, unfortunately, with super low budget things, you kind of have to. But, everyone got paid something. Right. And I that was very important to me. But I was like, we're also making, like, I want to make this good. Mm-hmm. But that's a very scary thing to say when you're like, and I'm going to direct it and I'm going to be in it.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I can't even imagine it's your feature directorial debut, but it's not your first time directing something. But you're starring in it. You're probably in almost every frame, right? So then it's like the pressure of watching other people's acting, making sure you're getting what you need from them. Then also being like, oh yeah, I have to perform. Yeah. So did you find, where were the challenges in directing and starring in this beast of a film that you wrote?
I think I probably, and I heard Cooper Raiff say this in an interview, because he's like directed himself a lot, that he like thinks the people he lets down the most are the other actors. And that's probably pretty accurate of just like, it's hard to give other actors notes if you're in a scene with them, and this is something that I just have to like work through, because you feel like such a jerk to be like, hey, so actually, because that's like
this different.
You're so trained to not do that as an actor. It's like, do not give your fellow actors notes. Like, never do that.
So you have to like unlearn all the things as an actor you've been taught to then step into the director's role.
Yeah.
And I imagine, being across from somebody doing a scene with them, if it's not hitting for you as the director, right?
Yeah.
But also as the actor.
You're
like, I need more, or I need less, or whatever.
And like, luckily there weren't a ton of, moments where I was like, oof, like they're really not quite getting it, or they don't understand this character person or the situation. And big things like that are kind of easy to explain or easy to be like, actually, I kind of thought of her as more of like this person.
Right.
So we could have those conversations. Also, my first AD was amazing. And I had worked with her before on a feature that I just acted in. And I knew that she was just like, could keep everything afloat. So she also would come in and give notes to the other actors sometimes, or like we would kind of chat.
That's helpful.
And then she'd be like, can you tell them this? And I'd be like, okay,
I feel like
yeah, sure. And then she would tell them a different note or whatever
having
it was.
a first AD that is clutch and is like knows you and you work well with is like, I feel in my experience is one of the key elements that's like, do not overlook your first AD. Like, do not skimp on that person. Don't skimp on the process of finding that person, because especially directing, I didn't direct the last project I did, but I produced it and starred in it and felt like, I mean, I was right there with Farron and we were doing the thing. And our first AD on that project was amazing. Shout out to Britt. And it was like, without her, like, you just think about the things wouldn't have kept moving. And I imagine you're in this film, you're directing it, having somebody you can be like, hey, can you actually give that note? Because it might come off better. And having someone strong enough to do that. And also a female, which is dope. I'm like curious about
Jen
your set dynamics. You know, how many women were you able to bring into the fold? How many other, you know, actors that are doing stuff in the industry that you were able to get attached, like just kind of the process of bringing crew and cast together. Like, was that a fun process? Was it stressful?
It was like, I mean, yes and no. There was parts of it that were fun. I mean, I think another big takeaway that like, as much as you want your film to be summer camp, it's not summer camp, and that's okay. And like, I mean, or maybe it's not okay and you disagree with me and that's fine, but I'm telling myself that it's okay. So, cause I really did, like, I just wanted people to have a good time, and I know that it's work and it's hard work, but you know, we were all in the middle of nowhere in Vermont and New Hampshire, going to these like crazy beautiful locations. And so I wanted everyone to get along, and, you know, there was definitely just experience levels that you know, it created some like tension between various people. But my biggest thing, like, basically Jen, my first AD, and Seth, who was my DP, like, I knew Seth and I had been working on the film for ages. Like, we talked through the whole thing, so we knew what we were going to be doing in every scene and every shot, and then we threw half of it away, but like, that's the point. But I think that was a really important like dynamic of like the three of us to have, because we were able, like, yes, I had the ultimate say of everything, which was sort of like just unspoken, of course, but we were able to offer each other like, you know, advice or thoughts or whatever. Because there was definitely times where we were in a scene where it was like, okay, Julia, like, what are you thinking about this shot over here? Like, I'm thinking maybe from over here. And I just like, I was like, I have no opinion.
Make the choice.
I truly do not.
I trust you. But I think it's important to bring people into the fold that you trust, because you know, doing that research and choosing people, selecting people to bring your project to life is a big deal. And it's also like, you need to trust these people. Yes, you're going to be spending time with them. It's so funny because some of the industry, you know, you look at some of these artists and actors or producers, whatever, that work with the same people over and over. And part of me used to be like, ew, like, switch it up.
Way to let everyone else in.
What? Yeah. And it was like, it felt like very like the boys club of it all. Like, I think it was like Seth Rogen always has like, you know, even Adam Sandler, right, has his friends in all his films, and I'm like, I can't wait to make a project and just put all my friends in it. But to a certain extent, if you work well with people, you become friends with them, and then of course, the next project you're gonna be like, I'm bringing Jen, like, she's dope. I'm bringing my first AD along with me. I imagine it's kind of similar to like hair and makeup artists for talent that they do my shit well. Why would I switch that? You know, I'm bringing in my own people. So I think that's great that you had that support system on set, and those people that you trusted to make your project with you and bring it to life. How, on that note, how do you feel your support system outside of this project helped you bring it to life. I know you have a very supportive husband, but like you take on a lot, and it's a lot for someone in your position, right? To be like, I'm going to write, direct, star, I'll do all the things and bring this to life. And it's obviously been something you've been working on the past year, if not more. Yeah. So how have your outside support system been helpful to you?
Oh man. I mean, so like just listening to my bullshit for over and over again so, like is super helpful. Because
shout out to all the bullshit listeners.
Because that's really all like so much of like, if I could just talk about the film like that, I mean, this is a very fancy way of talking about the film, but like every day until it comes out, until I'm like, well, now it's the world's and it is what it is. Like that would be great, because I just need to like process it. And I oscillate between, and now that I've seen a few clips from the film, I'm like, okay. Yeah. But for a while there, I like hadn't seen any of the film. So then it's like the one or two things that kind of didn't go the way that I wanted it to.
It's easy to like
that's
fixate.
all you think about. I'm just like, well, that scene's just not going to work at all. And what's going to happen? The whole film's going to be trash. And, you know.
When you got back from filming, was there any point in time where you were able to kind of like step away from it for a second?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
I totally was like, I don't want to talk about it. And that's another like pacing thing. Like I think everyone was like, okay, so because we have to film one last day, which we were filming hopefully in February. And we are starting the edit, which was put on pause a little bit. We finished shooting the main portion of it at the beginning of September. So there has been like a couple of months here in between. But that was sort of nice because I think it allowed me to take a break from it. Because I do think I put so much effort and so much energy and all of my time into it that I got to a point where I was like, I don't care. It's not that I don't care, but I just can't care anymore. I have to like turn off for a second. And I feel like I'm being annoying because this is like the only thing in my life.
The amount of times I've like word vomited onto my husband about a script scene that I'm working on that I can't work through. And 9 times out of 10, I'm not really looking for feedback. I'm literally just speaking out loud and talking through the problem. And so by the time I'm done vomiting onto him, he's like, oh, and I'm like, I figured it out. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it's like, I just needed to process it out loud. With somebody pretending to listen. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had to like say that to him. I don't need you to help me fix this. I just need to process and I need to get it out of my head and like talk through it as if you're listening, as if you're going to give me feedback and fix my problem. But I imagine that you get home and you're like, okay, I've been doing this. And obviously when you're on set, it's like crunch time. How many days did you shoot?
We shot 15 days. I think that's right. Yeah.
And then you have a couple pickup days in February you're going to do.
Yep.
And so you step away from it. You're back into reality. You have a little bit of a pause because of like waiting to kind of get into the edit and schedule the next scenes. In your mind, are you thinking like, okay, I can take a breath and like just do nothing that has to do with the film? Or was there kind of that bird on the shoulder that's like ticking at you like, okay, like keep going. What's next? What's next?
I think yes, absolutely. There's always, until it's like done, I'll always be like, okay, so what, like, even if it's just like, if other people ask, like no one, like people care, but like who's going to ask me like, so what's happening with your film? Like
except for me
a week after. But I think it's good to like step away from it. And now I feel like I more think back to it and I'm just like, damn, I wish like, I think these things went really well. And like, I just wish we had like an extra 2 hours that one day or like an extra that day. But it doesn't like weigh on me. I feel like the way that it did when it was like immediately over. And it's such, as a people pleaser and as someone who like really needs other people to like me, it was such a test in like, you have to not care about that. You really do. And it's also like, it's okay because if it ends up being amazing, the people who trash talked it suddenly will change their tune.
100%.
Not that anyone is trash talking it.
It's in your head. No,
I'm
but
in my
like,
head. But I think that is such an important, like, that was such an important lesson for me, is that I was like, no, the times when I was just trusting, like, this is my vision for it, this is who I want for it, like, let's try to figure out how to get, like, this actor or this, you know, location or blah, blah, blah. That is when it worked. And it was when I stepped back and, like, had a little more time to think about it, or that was when I got in my head. And I think that was helpful as an actor in it, because I had so much other things to do that I could just be so present in the scene because I had to be.
You had to be. Yeah.
And yeah.
Looking back on it now, what are some of, like, the biggest learning lessons that you'll take into your next project that you got to take away? And I mean, I know you're still heavily, like, in the process of this film.
I think, like, following my gut about really anything, whether it's like crew people that we brought on board or cast members that we brought on board. Like, there was a couple people where it was like, it won't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it would be like, oh, this person has like one or two lines, and like there was just something that wasn't quite working, but we went with them because their, you know, audition tape was great and fine.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that feeling was right, because whatever, they ended up
trust your gut,
wasting time, or, you know, that we could not fucking waste. Like, we were so in crunch time that even 20 minutes meant like, okay, well, now we have to not film that because we have to get the sunset, which is going to happen at this time, and the color's going to change. And
people understand that aren't maybe engulfed in the indie world, like how much is riding on each and every hour and day that you have, because for 15 days, a feature film, like that's, and I mean, like I said, you know, you have a few more scenes to shoot, but like there's crunch time, and it's like you're paying people to be there for 10 or 12 hours. Like, you don't want to go over. There's a lot of content to capture in that amount of time. And it's like, there really is no time to waste, as much as Hollywood wastes so much money and time on the littlest things.
Yeah. Everyone has their own shit going on. So like, if they are having kind of a shitty day and it just happens to be like one of the days that you're filming, that's not on you. Like, it's not. And so that's their own, you know, it's not your job to like babysit everyone. And I think it's really easy for women to do that, is just be like, well, is everyone happy?
Yeah.
And is everyone like having a good time? And did you get enough food? And did you get enough this? And like, and yeah, it was funny. I was talking to my mom the other day, actually, and I was just like, oh, like some of those things, like just little things that made me mad, where I was like, oh, I was paying this person to do this, and like they just kind of dropped the ball like on this moment or whatever. Right. And she's like, oh yeah, like she said something about like being kind of like a bitch or whatever. And I was like, but I'm not. I literally hired them to do a job, and
you expect it to be done.
I expect them to do the job.
It's not wrong. And that's where I'm like, it's interesting because, you know, there is such a push for like inclusivity and diversity, which I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's now gotten to the point where it's like, that's more of the focus rather than just casting or bringing or hiring crew or people that are right for the job.
Yeah.
And because I'm never going to say like, no white men on set ever again. Like I don't think that's right either.
Yeah.
I have 1,000,001 friends who are very talented in what they do, who are all nationalities and races and all the things.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't matter. And that's why it's really frustrating that it still kind of feels like it does. And it even comes down to like the male versus female and the gender and the non-gender of it all. And it's just like, I hate that in a world of creativity and art, we're still having that conversation.
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like, in my experience, like every artist that I've met for the most part has been like extremely open and welcoming and like fluid, and creativity is at the forefront, and bringing the art to life is at the forefront, and like creating something impactful that makes people think and brings people together is the goal.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the business side of things, it feels like oh, we got to check these boxes. We got to do this. We got to do
gotta do
that.
this.
So I completely get like, and it's nice because hopefully in the indie world, we can have a say. I know in like the corporate kind of studio side of things, it's very numbers driven and kind of political in that way. But yeah, I find that interesting because we all have a different mission with our work. And to get back to your projects, like you've started to create this really beautiful voice. I don't even know. This art that you make it's specific to you. So that I love that because at a certain point, you're going to have a body of work where it's like, oh, that's Julia Coulter's work. Like, fuck yeah. I'm going to watch something and I'm going to be like, oh, I know whose this is. Just as like a Wes Anderson or a Tarantino has their voice and their spin. It's not hard to pick out their films because of the shots they do and all the things. But I love your work.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, I want to just quickly touch on the inspiration behind the film and moving forward from where you're at in the film now and like next steps. So like what inspired you to tell your story? How much of it is a true story and stems from truth?
From truth. A lot, but not really. So it's about a woman who has a congenital heart defect, which I do have. And that is something that was very important to me in the casting process. We have, not a ton, but at least a handful of people who have various disabilities who are involved in the film, both crew and cast. And it basically, the woman who I play, after the sudden death of her father, decides to train to ride the L'Étape du Tour, which is a stage ride of the Tour de France.
Like a portion of that ride.
Yeah,
okay.
So the Tour de France is broken up into stages, and each day is a stage, and so it's basically one day of the Tour de France. And it's open to the public, sort of. I mean, you have to be a certain level of like biker to do it, but my father in real life has done the L'Étape du Tour a few times, and he is alive. And that whole storyline was very made up, but kind of inspired by brothers and some of the stuff in that film of just like, there's been a lot of early deaths in my father's side of the family. Almost all of them are related to heart problems. And because I have a heart defect, that was like an important thing that I wanted to talk about, not something that I had seen on screen that often. And so that was also kind of me wanting to cast myself, is that it really came down to like, can we find somebody else who we would trust with this role, who has a heart defect and who, we wanted there to be some authenticity there. So that's like the loose plot of the film, and my connection to it is very much the heart defects. I am a bike rider. I have ridden like 50 miles on my bike before, but in the movie she's supposed to ride 100. That's what she's training for, and then it's also kind of a romance. There's like romantic elements to it. We
brought in some romance.
Had to.
I love that. Yeah. What would be your words of wisdom to any aspiring or indie filmmaker out there who's maybe on the verge of wanting to make their first project or second project or whatever, and it kind of needs that little nudge boost or sign, like just do it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know. I think you have to like get to a place where you feel confident enough with the script. I think a lot of people get held up by their writing or their script. And yes, I did have like Sundance kind of say like, okay, this is pretty good. And Austin Film Festival, like that was enough for me to be like, okay, this is good. And we're moving on. And so at a certain point, and this is also very indie film, like once you get into studios, like people will give you notes and you need to take them, and there are definitely notes that I will be seeking once we finish editing, but like I think just giving yourself permission to be like, this is the story that I want to tell, this is what it's going to be. So many things, like if you're going in and just making notes on like the lines, like individual little things, you're fine. You can do, like, not that you should do a ton of that on set, but you can do that on set.
Yeah. Shouldn't hold you up.
Yeah. And you might get to the edit and cut that entire scene anyways. I mean, we cut an entire scene from the film because we couldn't find a fucking location for it.
Wow.
And then the actor who we had hired for it dropped out. And we were like, well, that's probably a sign.
That's a sign we don't
I guess
need
we'll
this.
cut this scene.
Oh my gosh. I love it.
So just, get to a place where you're like confident enough with your work. I would say find some sort of team, even if that's just like one other person, like whether it's your first AD that you like, because then those people can start to suggest people, and then it kind of builds into this big thing that it ultimately becomes. But
I love that. And what I'm hearing too is like, don't get in your own way.
Yeah.
Just do it. Make your work, make your art. And whether it's a feature film, a short film, a reel on Instagram, like you've also said too, like you've got to stop caring what other people think about your work and your art, because the way I see it and take that is like, you have to love it. You have to be okay with it, because at the end of the day, it's your interpretation of a moment or an experience. Yeah. And every single person is going to interpret it differently.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yay. Thank you. This was super fun.
Where can everybody find you and and kind of stay in touch with the project and your progress and how it's going? And
so my Instagram is Julia Q Coulter. So
I will link it in the show notes.
My first and last name and then a Q in the middle, which is pretty much all of my things are. Yeah.
And you have a page for the film?
I don't have a page for the film. Well, I do, but not really. I have my website, which is like julia-coulter.com, has a page on it with the film, which has the donation link to it. Are you
still accepting? That was going to be my
We are
next
still
question.
accepting donations. We've closed our investment platform, though.
Okay. But you're still accepting and looking to fund some of the next
steps. Yes, we are. We recently got a donation, which is amazing, and we're so excited because we're finishing the edit. We're finishing the last day. Juliana's going to be in one of the scenes on the last day.
I'm going to make my debut.
And it'll get us through, like, so that we can show people the thing, basically.
So excited. Well, thank you so much for coming, shedding light on your experience as a filmmaker and kind of giving us a little behind the scenes of this project and the making of it. I can't wait to see it. I've said that a million times, and hopefully there will be like a private screening that I'll get to go to. And thank you for coming on Bitter Bitch.
Thank you.
See you next Tuesday. Bitches.